The air in room 237 of the Albustan Rotana smelled like stale cigarettes and ozone. It was 11:30 a.m. on January 20th, 2010, when the hotel maid, exhausted from the shift, finally swiped the keycard. She didn't find the expected mess of a hurried businessman. She found silence. The man lay in the center of the bed, one arm draped over the edge, as if in a deep natural sleep. The maid initially thought nothing of it, just another tourist who missed checkout. She called reception. Reception called security. Security called the police. What happened next became the foundational crisis of modern intelligence operations, because in a city built entirely out of glass, steel, and high-definition lenses, this death was supposed to be invisible. The fact that Daman Mahmoud al-Mab, a chief engineer for Hamas's arms smuggling network, had seemingly passed away from a sudden fatal heart attack, was a triumph of execution. The fact that every second of the 19 operatives involved in his demise had been captured by high-resolution surveillance cameras was a strategic catastrophe. It was the perfect crime, undone by the infrastructure of the future. To understand the cold, precise stillness of room 237, we must rewind 3 years, to the moment when a name whispered in Tel Aviv became a strategic impact in the global calculus of counterterrorism. Al-Mabahou was not a bomb. He was the logistics engine. While others focused on explosives, Mabhou moved the goods. He was the vital conduit connecting Tehran's military resources with Hamas's operations in Gaza. He didn't just buy rockets, he built a supply chain complex, invisible railroad running through Sudan, Eritrea, and increasingly, the neutral territory of the United Arab Emirates. He had become too effective, too disciplined in his trade. The constant stream of advanced weaponry required an equally decisive response. The Mossad designated the mission Operation Desert Tide. It wasn't about revenge, it was about tearing the axle out of the supply cart. The challenge was unprecedented. Mabhou operated almost exclusively in places like Dubai ultra-modern hubs, where privacy was an illusion, and the number of surveillance cameras per square mile dwarfed London and New York combined. Any traditional hit or roadside bomb, a quick gunshot would guarantee immediate international backlash, compromising Israel's deep network of regional cooperation. The only way was a ghosting operation. Make him disappear while he was still physically present. A medically convincing fiction. The team assembled was small, lean, and terrifyingly specialized. They weren't soldiers, they were actors. There was Eli, the choreographer, the team leader, specializing in temporal sync. Tamar, the medical specialist, a chemist with steady hands, and nearly 20 others, divided into 3 waves: the advanced reconnaissance, the surveillance tails, and the execution strike team. Their first layer of defense was ludicrous. Disguise. If you are a Mossad agent, the worst thing you can wear is black fatigues and a grim expression. The best thing you can wear is a bright-colored polo shirt, a floppy sun hat, and thick, unfashionable glasses. They arrived in Dubai over a period of 48 hours, using European passports. Irish, British, German, all meticulously sourced and perfectly genuine, just issued 2 false identities. The cover stories were exhausting in their banality. 2 teams of tech consultants on a networking retreat, a loud group of vacationing tennis players, a quiet pair of real estate agents scouting luxury villas. Ila, the choreographer, arrived wearing a baseball cap pulled low, clutching a plastic shopping bag containing duty-free cologne. His jacket was ill-fitting. He looked exactly like a forgettable middle manager on a tedious business trip. The first 72 hours in Dubai were dedicated not to the target, but to the cameras. They had satellite photos and blueprints of the Albustan Rotana, but nothing prepared them for the sheer density of the digital witnesses. Every hallway junction, every elevator, the pool area, the loading dock, each camera was a potential indictment. They developed a doctrine. Don't avoid the cameras. Use them. They had to treat the surveillance system itself as a team member, feeding it predictable, innocuous data points. An agent would walk down a corridor, check a phone, and then quickly duck into a service closet. 20 minutes later, a different agent in a different wig and different clothes would emerge from the same closet, establishing a false timeline for the camera operator who was likely distracted or bored. The problem, however, began with the surveillance tail. A young agent named Amos, who was tracking Mabhou's arrival from Damascus. Mabhou was a creature of habit, but possessed a deep, institutional paranoia. He arrived not at the main terminal, but via a little-used cargo route, taking an unscheduled, circuitous taxi ride to the hotel. The intel had predicted a late afternoon arrival. He showed up at 9 a.m. Amos nearly lost him in the flurry of airport traffic, forcing a dangerous high-speed maneuver to keep the taxi in sight. Amos managed to tail him to the hotel, but the early arrival threw the entire synchronization schedule off balance. Mabhao booked room 237 under a false identity. He made one phone call to Tehran, checked his bags, and then disappeared into the city for the rest of the day. The team was instantly thrown into a forced acceleration. The operation was slated for the next night to allow maximum time for preparation and rest. Now, the window was suddenly open, and the pressure was on. The risk of waiting another night was too high. Mabhao could leave the city as quickly as he arrived. Eli gathered the strike team in his safe apartment, rented miles away, its windows blacked out. The air conditioning unit hummed a tune of bureaucratic murder. "We move tonight," Eli stated, his voice flat. "Timeline is compressed, no room for error. Remember the cameras? They are not our enemy. They are just recording history." The team began their slow, precise infiltration of the hotel atmosphere. It wasn't about violence. It was about logistics and acting. Two agents, posing as a quarrelsome couple, checked into the room directly across the hall from 237. They argued loudly in fractured German about luggage and dinner plans, establishing a perfectly mundane presence that the cameras would deem The medical specialist, Tema, checked into a room on the floor above, carrying a large, professional-looking briefcase containing the necessary tools. Her cover was a pharmaceutical sales representative. She wore a severe black suit and sensible shoes. Every step she took was designed to blend into the background noise of the hotel's business clientele. The crucial moment came at 8 p.m. Mabhao returned to room 237. He ordered room service, ate alone, and settled down, likely preparing for his next leg of the smuggling journey. The lobby team, disguised as vacationers scrolling endlessly on their phones, monitored the staff movements. They needed a 15-minute window when the security office on the second floor would be manned by the night supervisor. Known for his obsession with soccer scores, the tension became a physical, finger-thin film of sweat under the heavy, synthetic wigs. Every agent was focused on their one task, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. In the hallway outside room 237, the German couple began to argue again, louder this time. The man slammed the door to their room, walked across the hall, and began fiddling with the thermostat located near Mabu's door. The camera focused on his frustration. This was the distraction, while the camera was occupied with the loud, angry tourist. To mend the technician, and the shadow glided silently down the corridor from the fire escape. They moved with the impossible grace of people who knew they were being watched, yet refused to acknowledge it. They reached room 237. The choreographer's intelligence had provided the exact model of electronic lock used by the hotel chain. The technician pulled out a small, custom-made device. Silence. The only sound was the distant, muffled argument of the German couple across the hall, punctuated by the rhythmic asterisk drip, dash drip asterisk of the lobby fountain, somehow audible even 3 floors up. Then, the first genuine, heart-stopping error. The electronic lock blinked red. It did not click. The technician whispered into his throat, "Mike," his voice ragged with disbelief. "It's a newer variant. Hardware upgrade. The keycard won't recognize the master code." The operation was dead in the water before it began. For 60 seconds, there were 2 men loitering outside a stranger's door on a quiet corridor, and the surveillance footage was bank in every frame. Eli, listening from the safe house, felt the cold weight of failure. He had calculated for everything except a maintenance upgrade. Abort. The word was on the tip of his tongue, but the technician looked down, ran his hand over the new lock housing, and realized the internal mechanics were the same. Only the external interface had changed. He couldn't use the electronic bypass, but he might still be able to pick the manual override hidden beneath the plastic veneer. It would be louder, slower, and incredibly exposed. He pulled out a thin, steel tension wrench. This was no longer a high-tech espionage operation. It was lockpicking in a 5-star hotel, captured by HD video. The German couple across the hall stopped arguing. The man was quiet. The sudden lack of noise was deafening. The shadow pressed himself against the wall, listening. The door across the hall opened slightly. The technician froze, his pick halfway into the manual override slot. The door to the German couple's room cracked open, revealing the face of the female agent. Her eyes wide, her face flushed with feigned anger. She stared directly at the shadow. The shadow did not move. It waited. The agent, recognizing the severity of the freeze, instantly amplified her cover. She stepped out, pulling a shawl around her shoulders. and spoke in sharp, loud German. "I told you, Klaus. You forget the reservation. Now we eat nothing. I need fresh air." She didn't look at the shadow again. She stumped past him, heading toward the elevator banks, creating a diversion trail on the surveillance footage of a woman leaving the scene due to a fight. This bought the technician 3 more seconds. Click. The door to room 237 yielded. The 2 men slipped inside, moving not like predators, but like shadows disturbed by light. The interior of the room was quiet, lit only by the faint light leaking from the bathroom. Mabhao was asleep. He was a large man, breathing heavily. The shadow immediately checked the closet and bathroom for potential surprises. The technician moved to the security panel, dismantling the phone line and the emergency alarm without disturbing the power grid. The air smelled of cheap deodorant and duty-free whiskey. Tamar, the medical specialist, entered next, having ascended the service elevator 2 minutes before. She carried her medical kit. This phase was the most critical. The execution had to look like a natural event, instantaneous and untraceable. Tamar prepared the syringe containing the specific muscle relaxant and suck drug that mimics the physiological effects of a major heart attack, shutting down the respiratory system without leaving residues easily traceable in a routine autopsy. The choreographer, Eli, had stressed the necessity of speed and placement. The injection had to be quick, clean, and in a location that would mimic a puncture wound from a medical procedure, should anyone investigate closely. Tamar raised the needle, and then the second break in the cadence. A high-pitched, insistent asterisk. Beep 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 asterisk cut through the stillness. It wasn't in the room. It was from the corridor outside, just down the hall. It was the sound of a hotel cleaner's cart being backed up. The late shift was starting their rounds earlier than scheduled. The shadow pressed himself flat against the wall, straining to hear the voices. The cleaning crew was approaching 237 if Taisao Te do not disturb sign was up, or if they paused to organize their cart directly outside the door. The mission was over. Tamar stopped, her hand frozen mid-air. Killing Mabahao while the cleaners were directly outside would turn a cleanup into a bloodbath, forcing an escape involving violence and immediate exposure. Ely, listening in the safe house, was calculating escape routes and extraction plans based on immediate physical engagement. The shadow took a risk. He grabbed the internal house phone that was still attached to the base. He dialed the front desk. "Maintenance," he whispered, feigning a thick Arabic accent, projecting a nervous urgency. "Room 241. There is flooding. Serious flooding. It is urgent." The volume was loud enough to carry through the door, creating immediate confusion for the approaching cleaners. The cleaners' conversation stopped. Flooding was a managerial nightmare, far more pressing than a routine vacuuming schedule. The cart noise shifted, and the voices receded as they moved down the hall toward the reported emergency in 241, giving them a precious 45 seconds of clear space. Tamar did not hesitate. The needle went in. It was over in an instant. They didn't waste a second watching him die. The objective was achieved. Now came the cleanup, which was not about blood, but about detail. They had to reset the room to look like a man dying naturally while waiting for dawn. The sheets were adjusted. The remote was placed near his hand. The door was carefully relocked from the outside, using the manual deadbolt. The shadow checked the camera monitor mounted on the ceiling outside the room. It blinked innocently. No suspicious activity recorded. Just a woman stomping away and a quiet moment of technical difficulty near the thermostat. They exited the hotel one by one, merging back into the flow of tourists and late-night workers. The feeling in the air was cold certainty. The target was neutralized. The strategic pipeline was broken, but the real threat wasn't Mabhao. It was the cameras. The extraction was a study in paranoia. 26 agents were now scattergoned across Dubai, each traveling under a different alias, each heading toward a different airport. Some drove to Abu Dhabi, others booked flights through Bahrain, others still took high-speed rail to connect with European hubs. They shed their identities like snakeskin. Wigs were tossed into dumpsters, miles apart. The loud, vibrant tourist clothing was exchanged for muted, unremarkable business attire. The thick glasses vanished. Eli, the choreographer, was the last to leave the city center. He felt the pure, debilitating stress of being hunted not by men, but by metadata. Every swipe of a keycard, every cell phone ping, every transaction all fed the digital beast. He arrived at the airport 3 hours before his flight to Frankfurt. His face was a mask of exhaustion, his mind racing through the thousands of video frames they had generated. Did the camera catch the reflection of the locksmith's tool, in the polished brass of the door handle? Did the way Timar carried our briefcase look unnatural on the security X? He bought a bland coffee and sat facing a massive departure board, using its reflective surface to check the environment behind him. The psychological terror of the escape was far worse than the operational risk. In the field, you could fight back against digital evidence. You could only run and hope the processing speed of the authorities was slower than your flight path. He boarded his flight, settled into his aisle seat, and watched the desert lights recede as the plane climbed toward cruising altitude. A wave of profound, weary relief washed over him. They had pulled it off. Impossible odds, 0 casualties, mission accomplished. It was 4:30 a.m. He closed his eyes, allowing himself the first deep breath in 72 hours. Then, the small, encrypted satellite phone concealed in his seat cushion buzzed a coded alert from the team monitoring news and digital chatter in Tel Aviv. Eli opened the message. It was short, devastating, and entirely unexpected. Asterisk. Asterisk, code red. Dubai police. Not heart attack. Focusing on camera feed of the German couple and the locksmiths. Timeline compressed. Identification in progress. Dubai's advanced forensics had detected the tiny, nearly invisible needle mark, and the trace of the succinyl cholinate was fast, but not fast enough. More critically, the hotel's security, reviewing the timeline around the moment of Mabu's arrival, noticed something suspicious. The surveillance feed was too clean. They noticed the tourists who lingered too long near the fire exit. They tracked the German tourist who left the room fighting, only to have a flight path to the elevator contradicted by a camera on the next floor that showed her moving toward a service staircase. The camera system had done its job. It had recorded every detail, every disguise, and every perfect piece of sync. The Mossad team had managed to fool the human eye, but they failed to fool the algorithm. Eli stared out the dark window. The plane was already over the Mediterranean Tay-Weri safe, but the anonymity was gone. The identities of 26 operational agents, the foundation of their future fieldwork, had just been compromised, broadcast to the world via blurry stills of fake wigs and tennis rackets. The price of eliminating the supply chain engineer was the exposure of the entire network. Back in Tel Aviv, the debriefing room was silent, save for the clicking of keys and the rustle of paper. There were no cheers, no celebratory drinks. The atmosphere was heavy with the cost of victory. The operational success of Operation Desert Tide was undeniable. Mabhao was dead, and the Iranian arms conduit was paralyzed for months, as Hamas scrambled to find a replacement engineer with his unique expertise and access. The immediate geopolitical objective was achieved, but the strategic failure was colossal. Witinawik Dubai police had released the surveillance footage. It was a 27-minute movie of unparalleled detail, showing the agents checking in, changing clothes, entering the room, and fleeing. The world media coined it the Hamas spy mystery, marveling at the audacity and in the after-action report, the agents were officially commended for their precision and cool under pressure. But their names, the fake names on the fake passports, were now burned forever. They were no longer invisible. They were famous. The director of the Mossad at the time understood the long-term impact. The world had just received a free, hour-by-hour masterclass on how Mossad infiltrates neutral territory. Every counterintelligence agency, every rival organization, would now know to look for the European tourist. The thick glasses, the casual polo shirt, the age of the high visibility, deep cover operations in hypermodern cities was effectively over. The reflection was stark. The Mossad had won the battle in room 237, but Dubai's surveillance infrastructure had won the war for strategic anonymity. The digital eye proved to be the toughest adversary of all. The necessity of the mission was never questioned. The cost, however, was still being paid years later. As the exposed agents were pulled from the field, their careers in the shadows permanently ended. Mahmoud al-Mabu's death was a clean, precise act of operational mastery. But the price was the secret identity, the greatest weapon of 26 men and women who had vanished into the digital ether. And the most chilling lesson of all, in the modern world. Sometimes the biggest risk isn't the enemy you face, but the memories stored on the hard drives watching over you.